All right, all right. Hello, everyone. Mark from Avalaunch here, and today we're back with the Deepwaters team, and to learn more about the exchange and what they're building and the impact that it's going to have on the industry. And previously, we had a talk with the team that was from more of a technical perspective, and today we're going to get into the business and growth side of things and the exchange features and kind of what it looks like to operate an exchange in today's landscape and in today's crypto world. So thanks a lot for joining us, guys. I really appreciate you coming back. And before we get into it, maybe we could just have a quick, brief intro for each of you. Greg, you can take it off if you want. Just who you are and what you work on with the project.
Yeah, sure. I'm Greg Barnes, CTO at Deepwaters. Traditional background in education and engineering. The fun fact about me is how I got into the space in the first place. So actually, in a past life, I was a professional poker player, and this is how I was introduced to Bitcoin for the first time. Once I got my head wrapped around that and sort of had the aha moment, started a small mining operation. This was back like early 2016. Up in Washington State, we had access to cheap hydroelectric power. So got into Bitcoin and Ethereum pretty early, and then a few of the early ICOs. And from that point, really just dove more and more into the space and eventually transitioned to full time. But for me, I'm definitely an engineer, but uh, entrepreneurial tendencies for certain.
Yeah, right on. And how about you, Carlton?
I'm Carlton Hoyt. I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations here at Deepwaters. Basically, if there's something that needs to get done and no one else to do it, that's me. I'm the guy. So my background, I actually come from the life sciences. I have a PhD in neuroscience, got that way back in the day. Did mostly marketing in the life sciences. I don't like sitting at a lab bench all day. It gets really boring. Not something that I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
More of a dollars and cents guy, which is kind of what led me into crypto. I was a crypto investor starting back in 2016, saw the ups and downs a little bit. Was and still am an IOTA fanboy, and this is actually my first professional foray into the space. I get to bring my marketing knowledge, my trading knowledge, which is I have done a lot of trading in my time, and also just my operational knowledge. I've done a lot of startups before,
Mm-hmm.
so it's really great. Provides a lot of fun opportunities to expand and do new things.
Yeah, right on, right on. So to just kind of set the stage here, could you guys just give us a brief, kind of high level about Deep Waters and what some of its more sort of innovative, impactful features are that to kind of separate it from what's currently out there?
Yeah, sure. So I think it all comes from this recognition that the liberties taken by centralized exchanges, specifically around order flow and custody, are a serious and major threat to market integrity and the industry growth as a whole. So Deepwaters aims to change this, and the mission is really simple. We're just trying to build an exchange the right way. So that's
Mm-hmm.
really focused on three big paradigms, and those are the major features of the exchange. So number one, you have transparency. For us, this means open sourcing that business logic and the code that sits behind the exchange operations and custody. Fairness, meaning all traders are treated the same. There's no information asymmetry here. There's no privileged parties that get this kind of early access to order flow. No PFOF payment for order flow. Everyone is treated truly fair, whether you're a retail small time trader or you're a professional market maker or an institution. It's a level playing field.
Mm-hmm.
Natural selection, right? And then the last part, provability. We're building a system where we don't actually have to ask our customers to trust us. Instead, we allow them to independently validate and prove that the software that we claim and we expose through that open sourcing is in fact running on our back end. And through this, we can kind of enforce the ideas of a trustless system that is transparent. And these are really the core ideas behind crypto and DeFi in general.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so listening to you talk about it, like it's pretty obvious, I think, why it's important, and not just because of what's been going on in the industry as of late, but also just for the industry to mature and evolve as a whole, regardless. But it's a pretty specific vision and mission, and I just kind of wonder what the inspiration was for you guys to devote your life to this, and once that kind of took hold, how long did it take to go from point A to point B? That inspiration, that drive to where you currently are today.
Yeah, sure. I think the project started about a year and a half ago. We don't have Zorik with us today, our CEO. He's actually in Switzerland. Uh, I don't know if we can talk about what he's doing over there, Carlton.
I mean, they're just going, meeting a bunch of people face to face. It's leading up to the World Economic Forum. There's a lot of events going on there that are really valuable for us to be at. Just partners, investors, all kinds of relationships.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll be putting out some announcements around that, I think, in the near future. But yeah, the project started about a year and a half ago, and um, Zorik was a part of that. So he actually, in his past, he's done quite a lot of things over the years, but he's a very experienced leader and actually has a computer science background as well. But at one point in his life, he was managing 25 traders for his own fund.
Yeah.
It was a high frequency trading fund, and he's been burned along the way. I mean, he's been in trading since you had to pick up a phone call to place an order and get a status on the state of your current trades. But along the way, he was just burned and disgusted by the practices of the industry. And as technology got better, uh, practices in some cases got worse or more exploitative. And we've seen this in crypto. We've seen the same problems resurface and show themselves here with Celsius, Three Arrows Capital, now FTX, and who knows what's going to happen with the whole DCG fiasco. There are real problems in the industry, and
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is just design a system to solve that point of control and the human element that makes that possible.
Right, right, and I think it'd be easy to say, this is, and we talked about this a little last time. I think what sort of great timing this is for you, and how relevant it is today. But I think it's actually just more of a testament to your guys' vision about again where the industry needs to go to be sustainable and actually leverage what makes blockchain so powerful in a more feature rich experience that people are kind of used to. And in DeFi, AMMs, when you're talking about exchanges that aren't centralized, and you guys talk about Deepwaters being a hybrid exchange, which is actually something I kind of want to talk about next. But when you look at what people are used to and what's available today, in DeFi, a lot of people are using AMMs, and everyone's pretty familiar with that trading experience looks like. So as a user, how does the Deepwaters exchange like compare to the trading experience people might be used to, buying, selling on an AMM?
Yeah, sure. So the first version of Deepwaters, the first product that we're releasing is a central limit order book. And the experience using that is very much like using the major exchanges, the major centralized exchanges that you're used to, like Binance. So trading feels a lot like one of those. It's fast. You have these advanced order types and trading features. It's gas fee trading. The difference is that Deepwaters is built on this provably fair and secure system. So again, no privileged parties, no early access to order flow, no payment for order flow. But at the same time, this platform is provably more secure. And we use things like we are actually introducing this really cool EIP 712 signing paradigm where we're inherently checking that you own the keys associated with your account in order to initiate any kind of trades or transfers or really any activities around the assets that are yours, even though they're in the system.
I like
Mm-hmm.
to summarize it as your wallet is kind of your remote control for your funds. If somebody doesn't have your wallet, they can't touch your funds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and this is kind of a really cool point, Carlton. Like if you think about this abstraction of self custody, we kind of exhibit the same characteristics of something like an AMM, but have the same advantages of a centralized exchange, and that's why we
Mm-hmm.
call ourselves a hybrid.
Okay. And so let's talk about that just a little bit more. So obviously you have centralized exchanges, which are fully centralized, controlled by the exchange. They live on a server behind, a wall that no one can kind of peer into. And then you have a fully decentralized exchange like an AMM that's, operating. There's servers involved, but operating from smart contracts. But you guys characterize yourself as a hybrid exchange. So where is the kind of trade-off in because it would be sort of maybe natural to describe Deepwaters as a decentralized exchange, but it's not. So help us understand, why you've kind of coined this term hybrid exchange.
Yeah, sure. So I think conceptually, it's good to think about us like a centralized exchange in the fact that a lot of the matching of orders and the complex operations are happening off chain. So this is what allows us to be fast and to be gasless and this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that back end that we're talking about is sitting inside of something called a trusted execution environment. And this is a paradigm called confidential computing. And the idea here is that you can create something of a black box that no one can peer into. So that means you can prevent things like privileged access to information that, as the owners of the exchange, we shouldn't have. What it also means is that we can actually enforce the rules that we say we're enforcing. So when we open source our code and we say we're not going to repo your assets, we're not going to take crazy risks with your money,
Yeah.
we can put that code out there and allow you as a user to subscribe to something called remote attestation and prove that that software is running on our system.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
in this way, we are a centralized exchange in that respect. It's running on a back end, but at the same time, we're able to enforce a lot of these features and be transparent about it. And at the same time, we can also enforce the same kind of key signing paradigm that you would on a decentralized exchange. We can take a signature, even if it's off chain, that you're generating on your side. We never have access to your private key, but we can validate and verify that your transaction and that signature belongs to your address.
Uh-huh.
And just going back to that remote attestation, that really is like a decentralized real-time validation of the platform. So, in doing that, we're not just bringing some of the, technological concepts from DeFi, but we're bringing just some of the underlying, I guess you can call them ethical concepts as well. We're really bringing trustlessness to what is ostensibly a centralized system. And I don't think anybody's ever done that before.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as a user, it's kind of like, the best of both worlds. When you're interacting with DeFi, when you're, taking positions, like as a user, you're finding reasons to interact with an AMM, reasons to interact with a centralized exchange. And what projects will normally do is, if they get listed on a centralized exchange, they'll also create a liquidity pool on an AMM for a number of reasons, but one of the primary ones is just better access. Right? Not everyone's going to want to sign up with an exchange. Not everyone can sign up with this exchange. And so with Deepwaters, this starts to change a little bit. And so I wonder, from the perspective of a project who's going to market and launching and listing, and they're kind of looking at their options. I wonder how you guys look at the AMM, and is there still a need for an AMM? Is Deepwaters, inadvertently maybe replacing this, or is there kind of a strategy in a place for both as a project that's trying to create access and liquidity for their token?
So, with regards to like setting up, there's no like pools on Deepwaters. So, you wouldn't just like show up and drop in a bunch of liquidity and then anybody can trade your stuff. We are being compliant. So, we can't have, whoever wants to put in a token that does literally anything under the sun, right? We have no control over it. That's not a situation which would be okay with us. So, we're a central limit order book. And listing a new token on Deepwaters would be an application process like it would that similar with other centralized exchanges. One thing that we're doing is learning a lot from our own experience working with exchanges listing the WTR token. So really, we're learning a lot about what not to do. On a lot of centralized exchanges, the listing process is basically, I don't mean to say bad things about anybody, but it's really a cash grab. They charge really exorbitant fees. We don't want to do that. We want to have, very low fees. We're actually going to be offering 0 fee listings initially. Might continue to do that. Not sure. Because these high listing fees, they actually create a distorted incentive. So the exchanges charging these really high fees are incentivized to ignore what's good for the community, what's legal, the quality of the project and the team behind the token. They just are incentivized to get these huge fees. A lot of the listing agents are paid on commissions. So we want to eliminate all that. We want to offer tokens that the community wants and can benefit from having access to. We don't want to list tokens just because they can pay really high fees. We want tokens with really solid tokenomics. We're going to be very, very picky about that. A lot of projects tokenomics are essentially Ponzi's, which are more or less destined to go to zero. We want to know why a project has value. We want to know why the token has value. And, we take this sort of role as a custodian of our community very seriously. The whole point of Deepwaters is to protect traders. And part of the responsibility along with that is making sure that they're not exposed to, scams or other really bad tokens.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as someone who works with a lot of projects, obviously through the work that we do at Avalanche, we have a lot of experience with this as well, and it certainly leaves a lot to be desired. And I think there's this sort of natural want to have a fully featured, functioning, centralized exchange experience that is totally and completely decentralized. Like in crypto, we just sort of tend to go to that like endpoint, kind of a logical conclusion. Like, let's just decentralize the whole thing. And it's a nice idea, right? But I think we are absolutely still at this point where someone kind of has to step up and be somewhat of an intermediary in the process and pick the points, right? The strategic points of what's going to be centralized, what needs to be centralized to have this run well, and start to sort of gradually move away, starting with the really bad practices first and foremost from kind of like the status quo. So I really appreciate and like respect the strategy and the way you guys have gone about it, because I think it's not only really beneficial but also like really realistic for where just the world and the technology is at. I think it's a really good set of trade-offs. And I want to for anyone listening who's used to trading on an AMM, right, where you don't, the reason I keep going back to AMMs is because this is also a system where you don't necessarily need to register, give a KYC. You just kind of connect your wallet, deposit funds, or if you're going to be a liquidity provider or not, and then you're trading, right? So what is that parallel process look like for Deepwaters? Like, what is the sign up, connecting the wallet? You have to deposit funds into a smart contract, then you can kind of trade. What does that look like?
Yeah, I would say on Deepwaters it's somewhere in the middle. So we do use smart contracts to facilitate the deposits, and we use that elliptical curve cryptography that's built into your Web3 wallet. That gives us a little bit of extra security on the back end. So that's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we do have to wait for sufficient confirmations and make sure that you can't double spend these assets. This is a system where trades are happening off chain, right? So it's a little bit in between. We do enforce the security practices and kind of the advantages of smart contract approach, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, you have to recognize that there's a centralized component here.
Okay.
Yeah, and having the centralized component, we do have to KYC. So,
Yes.
again, maintaining compliance.
Yeah, for sure. And this is like in terms of the like the order types that are on the exchange. When you're trading on a centralized exchange, limit orders, market orders, stop losses, this kinds of thing. Is this something users can expect to see and experience? Like, are those like
Yeah.
features that are actually included with Deepwaters?
Yeah, sure. So day one, when we go into beta, limit and market orders are both going to be available. Over the next coming year, we plan to introduce some additional advanced trading, trading stop losses and more sophisticated order types, if you will.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what about just general liquidity and market making? And when you list your token on a centralized exchange, these centralized exchanges have very strict requirements around needing a market maker.
Sure.
Having sometimes volume requirements, this kind of thing. But I would imagine with your technology, this might not be something that market makers are necessarily built for yet. Kind of the industry will need time to kind of come up to speed, I think, to what you guys are doing. So one, how does market making work, right? This is like a pretty critical function of markets today. And two, what are your guys' like requirements around this stuff? Like as a project, what could they expect to see?
Yeah, sure. So we do use market makers, which I think is an advantage over something like an AMM in a lot of ways. Um, for those of you guys that have provided liquidity before and are familiar with impermanent loss, market making through something like an API gives you a lot more control, and it's frankly it has a lot of advantages in that sense, and you could be very very active in what would be equivalent to a very concentrated liquidity. So you can stay on the inside market and be very reactive. For the market maker experience, this is going to be really very similar to what they're used to working with. We have an API, a fully featured GraphQL API, as well as a REST API that's going to be coming out over the next week. So that experience is very natural and very much what they're used to. There's a WebSocket component as well, so you get that initial snapshot of the market, and then you have a real live feed of updates to be able to construct the book internally. So it's a really powerful system, and it should be a great experience once they've integrated.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I think a point that other hybrid decentralized exchanges, wherever you're sort of on that spectrum, like a point of friction there has been like, this technology is new and it doesn't necessarily have an API, and encouraging market makers to develop their technology and develop their tools specifically for the exchange is problematic for a number of reasons.
Yeah, and I do want to mention here that we actually have built some tools around kind of a more passive liquidity provision approach, something that would be analogous to providing liquidity on a Uniswap.
Okay.
I'm not going to provide too many details about that on this call. That's a feature that's going to come a little bit later, but we're really excited about that. Putting this kind of a feature and risk management on a platform like ours, where we are centralized and we can build these kind of rules and avoid things like front running. It's a really interesting proposition. So we think we're going to have a better mousetrap there when it's all said and done.
Okay, that's very cool. I mean, it's something I actually wanted to ask about, and maybe you said all you can, but just to kind of provide like context for people listening, or maybe they don't sort of know or necessarily see the connection yet. Within AMM, I mean, yes, you're dealing with things like impermanent loss, but you can also participate in the exchange in a unique way through liquidity provision. You can just provide liquidity, and the exchange has incentive mechanisms to encourage the liquidity. And this isn't generally something that happens on centralized exchanges. There are other kinds of incentives, right? But as soon as you start moving into the realm of decentralized or hybrid, it's kind of like a natural question to understand if there's anything analogous to this, right? To encourage liquidity in the same way. And it sounds like there will be at some point in the future.
Yeah, we're absolutely planning for this. And I think a good analogy would be if you were an FTX user, for example, there was a means to be able to generate some revenue on your assets that were sitting on the platform. The difference here is that what we would build would be a lot more transparent and have these enforceable rules on the other side. So you can't have an Alameda type situation.
Right.
We're making sure that we architect anything of that nature with like protection of client funds in mind. We want to make sure this isn't something where people are just gonna like ape into and get wrecked.
Yeah. And a little earlier, you mentioned KYC, and obviously this leads us into a conversation about regulation and these topics, and as an exchange that's planning on taking on users from around the world. And I just think it's kind of an interesting topic to hear about from the inside. How are you guys thinking about regulation, accommodating as many users as is possible, with the restrictions of the law? What's the strategy there? And, for the community and the users, like, what can they expect? Who can participate? And, what are the trade-offs there?
Sure. So we want to be best in class with regards to crypto exchange compliance. So we're already making some necessary preparations to be compliant with the European MiCA regulations, which are currently still being formulated, but it'll probably come into effect sometime in 2024. We're not yet approaching some jurisdictions where the regulations are more stringent, and we'll add licensure over time as our time and resources allow. We're probably going to start with the United States later this year, The other areas where we have to, where we're looking to get our own separate licensure, the UK, Australia, Switzerland. So, we have kind of a roadmap for this. One of the reasons that we really want to make sure that we emphasize compliance so much is because we have long-term aspirations to move into traditional finance. And when you apply for, those actual traditional exchange licensures, they're going to scrutinize us very heavily. So we need to make sure that we're acting above board, so we're not compromising those longer term goals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. When I interact with centralized exchanges, and so the think about the incumbents. I mean, this is big business, and when you're dealing with a platform that potentially has millions of users on it, these users are customers, right? People that are going to have problems and issues with the technology, and again, I keep going back to this idea of the decentralized exchange because of the hybrid component and the way it differs from a user from a centralized exchange, in that there isn't necessarily a knowledge base and a ticketing system, and if you have problems, like, you got to go in the Discord and hope someone answers you, or go on Twitter and complain about it, although that happens with centralized exchanges. I mean, there's a lot of parallel systems that have to be set up, to have this be a well-run, functioning exchange. And I wonder what your guys' approach there and strategy is. I mean, is this, if I have an issue with the exchange, are you guys built to support it in a way that a centralized exchange might?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll have ticketing. We actually just signed up with Freshdesk earlier this month, and we have it up and running during the trading competition that we're currently running to test it out and iron out the wrinkles. We've promoted some of our best community admins to be support specialists. That's something I love, by the way. I love that these are some people who were really early supporters of Deepwaters. People in our Discord, before we even had mods, became community mods, then worked their way up to being full-time team members now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
One thing we're really, really sensitive to is the quality of our support. I mean, we've all experienced the support provided by centralized exchanges in crypto before, and I think I can say with a good deal of certainty that crypto exchanges have a very bad reputation for providing quality support. So we want to ensure that our support is helpful, timely. Actually, let me tell you a story. There was one time when I'm not going to name names because I don't want to call anybody out publicly, but it was obviously I'm in the US, a US crypto exchange that I had emailed their support team in 2017. They got back to me last year. No joke. They got back to me 5 years later. I was astonished they even bothered sending me the email.
Yeah, well, credit to them for at least following.
I guess, but that's an extreme example, right? But it highlights the problem. So we have a number of people on our team who have run support organizations before, myself included. So poor support is not something that's acceptable to us. We want to make sure our support game is grade A.
Yeah. I mean, and it's hard. It's like this is like a very specific discipline, and I love that you're able to take people from within the community. It's certainly not to suggest you can't hire for this role, but yeah, one of the great things about crypto is, like, you have all of these really sort of capable, smart, talented people who have spent time with your product and are so familiar with the culture and the philosophy of the project that even for a role like customer support, which is at the end of the day tremendously important, but still the core of Deepwaters is really reflected kind of at every level, and I just think that's like to your point. So one of the neatest things about crypto, we've hired a ton of people from within the community, and they are absolutely tend to be the best hires for so many reasons. And even with what's been going on with centralized exchanges and the poor customer support and the outright fraud, it's still just a tremendously competitive space, right? This is big business, and crypto is growing year over year, and there's a lot of competition for the users you guys are going after. And so I want to kind of transition into a conversation more about the marketing and growth strategy and how you become relevant and stay that way running a crypto exchange. So maybe you guys could talk about just generally some of your strategies for just user acquisition and making a name for Deepwaters and carving out a piece of the pie so you guys can use that as a foundation and really grow from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you mentioned that mistrust that people have for centralized exchanges now, and that's exactly what we're leaning into. A lot of people are looking at DeFi and saying, this is the answer. We have these trustless systems. Let's just use those. But they have their own set of problems. There's MEV, there's high fees, there's regulatory risk. Like, who even knows how long they're going to be allowed to continue operating? So they just might not be a good long-term solution. And people have historically just found centralized exchanges to provide better experiences for whatever reason. I'm not here to judge one versus the other, but more of the volume has been on centralized exchanges. Yeah. So what if we just fixed them, right? What if we could build a centralized exchange that has the trustlessness of DeFi? And that's what we're building. So, aside from simple preference with regards to user experience, there's a few reasons why people use DeFi. One is on principle. They just believe that these systems should be unregulated. They should be outside of government control. They should be governed by the masses. You can make arguments about how decentralized the various DeFi platforms actually are, but that's a different conversation. And then two is that trustlessness. The second reason that people use DeFi is that trustlessness. So, they're not going to take your money and run because they literally can't. Code is there. You can see it. You know how it's working, and you can see their operations in real time. So we want to take that second thing. We want to bring all of that trustlessness to centralized finance. So, that's our message. If you're tired of having to worry, if you're tired of getting, wrecked or worried that you're going to get wrecked by the next FTX, the next Voyager, BlockFi, Celsius, man, 2022 is busy, huh? Like, we want to get that behind us. We want to make sure that all of that is gone. We're not asking you to trust us because we're going to prove that you don't have to. And we don't think that, you should have to use DeFi in order to be able to have that trustlessness. You should be able to use a centralized system if you want. And, that's sort of our message.
Yeah. Yeah. So that kind of covers really well, actually, the marketing message and sort of like the call to action and what might compel a user away from a centralized system to a more hybrid system. But just for anyone that's in marketing or a founder that might be listening, since we have you guys here, I just think it'd be really interesting to talk about what a go-to-market strategy for something as big and important as a centralized exchange looks like. We at Avalaunch, we help a lot of startups. We're kind of we nerd out on this stuff, and so I'm just kind of interested to hear your guys' approach on it.
Sure, absolutely. Without going too far down the rabbit hole or giving up too much of the secret sauce, one thing I would say, this is crypto. Everybody says how important your community is, and it really is. We have a huge, supportive, enthusiastic community. Shout out to everybody in our Discord and following us on Twitter. Shout out to all of our great community mods and admins. Really, we could not do any of this without our community. We hope they continue with us on this journey to fix this space. Beyond that, we're an exchange. The success of an exchange is all based on volume. You have to create a platform that people want to trade on. So zooming out a little bit, what you need to do is, one, you need to incentivize traders. There needs to be a good reason for people to want to trade on your platform. For us, that's people who are buying into our mission. We're the anti-FTX. Beyond that, beyond just the mission, that's not enough. We're working on some launch promos for traders. Longer term, we want to ensure our fees are properly incentivizing people. And then the other side of that is market makers. Definitely need market makers on board if you're a centralized exchange to make sure that the order book has reasonable spread and depth. No one wants to trade a dead book. And that's, I guess, the high level overview of it.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. obviously you guys are building on Avalanche, launching through Avalanche. The Avalanche technology and ecosystem is kind of a core component, at least initially, or in some way forever. And this represents, I think, not just like part of the fundamentals of the business, but a partnership with an ecosystem. And you guys have other relationships with L1s, and these partnerships are foundational, I think, to a go-to-market strategy. And you guys have a number of them, and even if they're like maybe even more technical in nature, I was hoping you could talk about those partnerships, sort of what they practically mean for the project, and why that's kind of important for this go-to-market period.
Yeah, sure. I can take that one, Carlton. So I'll start with Avalanche or Avalanche first. I think these guys. The first time that we talked to them, we realized that they were doing something different, and the developer community was very strong. In particular, what they're doing around subnets, I think, is really intelligent and forward looking. So this is something that we're pretty excited about. This idea that we can use this kind of primary state chain idea, where we have sort of a master ledger for certain components of the exchange, and we can build a consensus based system on a subnet as well. So Avalanche, we found them to be just a really perfect solution for us initially, to kind of hold some of those primary state variables, and that the state changes.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, just more broadly speaking, any of the layer ones, it's a genuine partnership. So we deploy our on-chain endpoints there. That means that from that point on, we can support that ecosystem and any of the projects there. We could list any of the tokens that exist there. So we're working closely with all of these layer ones, just in terms of they're feeding us their highest quality projects, and we're listing those projects, right? And co-marketing, we get access to their entire community. They get the ability to put their most exciting projects in front of our community. It's just advantageous in both directions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And considering you have these integrations and partnerships with multiple ecosystems, but you have this technical focus on Avalanche, and I wonder if you guys consider yourself, an Avalanche project. Do you consider yourself a multi-chain project, or maybe something more like a preference chain project, where there's sort of this core that lives on Avalanche, but you're very agnostic otherwise.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, we're definitely chain agnostic in that we could support any blockchain ecosystem, and in fact, we want to support all the ecosystems that really have the communities to back them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we think Avalanche is ahead of the pack in some ways, and we've chosen them as kind of this primary state chain for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on. What about the token itself? It's an exchange token, and I want to talk about its utility and the model and the tokenomics. I think the exchange token model is actually sort of, when in certain versions of it, is when done right, is really, really strong, and it's actually one of my favorites. And so I want to go into talk about the token a little bit, its purpose, its utility, and the kind of the thinking behind launching the token, and how it's betters the platform as a whole.
Yeah, sure. So for us, I mean, first and foremost, it is redeemable for goods and services on the platform, and at a fixed price of 70 cents. Um, this makes the Avalanche offer a really, really good deal.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
essentially, we're pre-selling a lot of our services at a huge discount here. This means that you could spend it on trading fees, subscriptions, and any of the other services that we're going to launch in the future indefinitely.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
everyone here is really getting a great deal. But more broadly, WTR, you can think of it as a utility token, a community building tool for Deepwaters, and we use this to incentivize our early users, and our validators as well. These guys that are actually going in and subscribing to that remote attestation, and screaming from the rooftops that Deepwaters is running the software they say they're running, We pay you for that service.
Yeah.
And we want to allow our WTR holders some involvement in the community as well, or in the shaping of the platform, right? This means, what tokens do we prioritize when we're thinking about listings, and what ecosystems do we prioritize when we're focusing on the next integration. So these are all kind of, I would say, the primary use cases behind the token.
Got it. And the validator network is interesting, and I don't think we talked too much about that last time. So maybe you could just kind of go into that a little bit. What's its purpose? How does someone maybe get involved? And how does it tie into the economics of the overall exchange?
Yeah, sure. So the validator network, again, this is a network of independent parties that are subscribing to that remote attestation. And what that means is they are independently checking on Deepwaters and making sure that we're doing what we say we're doing. This is additional redundant security for everyone that uses our system on top of the trusted execution environments. This is a third party that's saying, yep, Deepwaters is doing the right thing here. As we move forward, we can add additional features on top of that. They can do even, more redundant auditing, and we can advance this as the years go by. But the validators themselves, we see this as a valuable service, right? They're building trust for our platform, they're spreading our message, and we're compensating them for that.
Yeah.
Now, to be a validator, we are going to be putting out basically a public validator client that anyone can run later this year. And to participate as a validator and get compensated, you do have to pass you have to sign up and pass KYC. And you have to bond some of these tokens. So there is kind of an element of you need some WTR to purchase in that role. But we do want to make clear that anyone can run a validator independently without bonding, just if they want to check themselves that the exchange is running the right way. But to be this kind of public voice and validator and get compensated, we would require a bond.
Yeah. And how technical is this process? I mean, is it pretty akin to validating any network? Where are like the limitations that kind of exist there?
Functionally, you can think of it like spinning up an Ethereum node, but in practice, it's going to be a lot easier than that and require a lot less in terms of resources. This is something that, the hardware to run it, we haven't put out official specs yet, but it's a very, very light client.
Yeah.
And
And
you
is
don't
there
need a ton of storage either.
okay? Is there a cap on that validator network? Like, is there a max number of validators, or is it just?
Yeah. So initially, we're going to be capping it. I think the number was 2,000, but this is going to be something that's floating. As we kind of scale out the infrastructure, we're going to want to grow this.
And what, like, this is kind of going maybe a little bit in the weeds, but like, how do you arrive at that cap? Like, what is the reason for that cap?
Honestly, it's just a throughput issue here. So this is just a means of scaling.
Okay.
For us, there's no downside to having more validators. In fact,
Right.
it's better, and the more people that feel comfortable and confident, the happier we all are.
For sure.
But at
For
some
sure.
point, I think people are going to, there are diehards out there that want to self-validate. They want to do everything themselves. But most people, if they see that there are sufficient independent validators outside of themselves and names that they know and trust, then they probably won't take the onus onto themselves.
Yeah. I mean, we're certainly interested in running a validator node. As Avalaunch, we'll definitely be participating. So that's something that we're looking out for and are excited about. We love participating in that way. And so this is something that's coming soon down the road. And you guys have like a very like sort of incremental, structured release schedule that builds on itself. What appears to be like quite strategically. And so normally, we talk about, just roadmap and where the project is headed and when, and, these kind of short-term, long-term milestones. But I think it'd be interesting to talk, just in a little bit more detail about your guys' roadmap and why it's planned the way that it is, when users can expect what, and just kind of learn more about the features of the exchange. And so we have the roadmap here, and I was hoping you could kind of talk us through it.
Yeah, sure. So this, looks over the next year roughly. In the short term, we're in our trading competition phase right now, which is leading up into our beta launch. If you guys have not signed up yet, go to deepwaters.xyz, actually tc.deepwaters.xyz if you want that specific URL. Make sure you get signed up. We're giving away 500,000 WTR, so there are plenty of prizes and fun to be had. Yeah, our beta launch is going to be January 31st, and after that, once we get out there, I would say the first major exciting announcements are going to be around token listing. So we're going to be introducing some new projects there over the coming months. Beyond that, looking out 3 to 6 months, we're actually integrating with a partner, Fireblocks, to further safeguard custody and kind of have this separation of concerns where we have a little bit of help on the custody side. So that helps to protect our client even further. Beyond that, we're integrating with Circle as well to kind of provide this really unified USDC experience. What that means is that this kind of very annoying idea of having all these different markets with different stablecoin pairs is solved here. We have one USDC that can be treated at parity, can be traverse multi-chain, and it's all happening directly through the Circle API. We think that's a really exciting feature. We're also looking at doing some blockchain integrations here as well, starting with the EVM compatible chains. So one of our partners here was Near. We're going to be looking at the Aurora integration first and foremost. Some Ethereum layer 2s we're looking at, and then looking at things like the Polkadot ecosystem. They have their Moonbeam chain, and Solana ecosystem has the Neon chain. These are all the ecosystems that we're kind of looking at very seriously right now. And yeah, it's just a matter of prioritizing.
Some hardcore traders are looking at the upper right side of that schedule and seeing margin trading and drooling slightly.
Yeah. It was actually something that I wanted to ask you guys about and forgot. So it's very cool to see that up there. I mean, what are like the technical challenges there around offering margin trading on a hybrid exchange?
Yeah, sure. So if you look a little bit to the left of margin trading, you see risk engine. That is the primary challenge here, is managing risk the right way and ultimately protecting the system and building all the safeguards to do this. Now, there's a lot of systems out there that have, let's call them like manual processes and oversight that exists that way. So you can halt trading and these sort of things. We have to be a little bit more careful here and be very methodical in the way that we design our system, because we're open sourcing the software, and if we put in a kill switch, for example, we're showing this to everyone, and everyone is fully aware that it's there. They're going to ask questions why it exists, and that forces us to think more critically and design a system the right way.
Right. It's an interesting point. Okay, cool. Well, that's a really, really strong roadmap. I appreciate you taking that time to share that with us. And we've covered a lot today, and I want to thank you guys for your time. But I also want to say, for anyone listening that's interested in the project, Deepwaters has done a really, really good job of engaging and rewarding the community in a way that really services the future of the project. And so if this is exciting to you, and this is something you want to be involved in, I would absolutely recommend joining the community and getting involved, because there's lots of ways to do it. There's lots of ways to contribute and add value to the future of this project. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's something that gets sort of bandied around a lot in crypto, but it's really hard to do well. And I think it's really hard to actually have that add meaningful value to the project. And I think you guys do a really, really good job of that. So that's good for anyone. So if you're interested, definitely check it out. Thanks for coming on here and allowing us to learn more. And we're certainly very, very excited about the IDO on Avalanche. And it's been a long, long time coming. And just really want to thank you guys for the good work that you're doing. And again, just being really open and honest and taking the time to let our community really learn at a deeper level what you guys are working on.
Thanks for having us, Mark. And thanks for letting me borrow your little Avalaunch right here.
Yeah, I know you stole it from me, but it's a pleasure to hand it off to you. All right. Well, thanks again, guys, and we will certainly do more of this in the future. You guys have a really dense roadmap, so there's lots to talk about, and that's great. So we'll do this again soon.
Yeah, happy
Sounds
to
great.
be back anytime.
All
You're
right.
always a
Thanks.
great host, Mark. Thanks again.
Appreciate
Really
it.
appreciate you.
Have a good rest of your day, guys. Thanks.